Hey, buddy. What's happening?
Berberine.
Berberine.
It's I think it's kind of like tree bark. I'm not real sure on this.
It sounds barky.
It doesn't take. Well, I just take a pill that has it in it. It's like a bright yellow when it's pure.
Interesting.
And
I would have expected it to be brown.
I take it for blood sugar management because my blood sugar, although I don't eat sugar, my natural blood sugar level is. I don't eat much sugar, I should say. My blood sugar is higher than I would like. It's not pre-diabetic or anything like that, but I don't want it to be because there's diabetes in my family.
Levels?
No, my insulin levels are good. They're healthy, but something about my body, I hover around, like my A1C hangs around like 5 point. I want to say it's like 5.6, and then like it's 5.5, and then 5.7 is the cusp of where they're like you should start thinking about taking things to manage your blood sugar levels because you're getting into pre-diabetic. And I would like it to be more like a 5.1 or 5.0.
So you don't eat a lot of Snickers?
I don't. I'm not saying I wouldn't if I was hungry. I don't want to be hangry, you know? I'm not against Snickers or sugar.
Berberine. If you need it.
Good afternoon. This is the More in Common podcast, and welcome. This is a place where we explore the fact that we have more in common than which divides us by anchoring humanity in compassionate conversation. And I know this for a fact because I've been a guest on the show, and Rodney and Keith are amazing at the art of conversation. My name's Tina McGuff, and I have written a book called Seconds to Snap, and Rodney and Keith asked me to do today's introduction, which I'm extremely grateful for. Remember, if you enjoy what you hear, you can find more on moreincommonpod.com, where you'll find all the podcasts, merchandise and blogs. And if you like what you hear, definitely let everybody else know, because there's so much fantastic conversations on there where we can all learn from one another and see how much we are actually all rooted together. Today's episode is with Keith Ferguson. I've been very fortunate. I've heard this podcast already, just to give me a little bit of an insight into what to say about this introduction today. And I'm extremely blessed. What a lovely man, and what a great life he's experienced, and what things he's doing now. He talks about barriers to entry into legal work. He talks about how he came from poverty to become an attorney, and his dad was his primary carer, growing up without his mum, the impact of premarital counselling, and there's so many things that's very interesting. One of them is, of course, getting into Cornell's Football Hall of Fame, which is quite something as well, and so much more. So I would highly recommend today's podcast for you to have a listen to. This is the part of the season dubbed Discovery of Season 2, and I really hope you enjoy it as much as I did. Take care now. Thank you.
So before we get into this episode, I got to tell you a little bit of something that Rodney got me into about 7 months ago. One of those things, like, he talks about these things all the time, and I hardly ever try them. But this one in particular, Audible for audiobook listening. Like, I tell you, I love reading books. I don't have a lot of time. I got 2 kids, 2 jobs. I got, a relationship that I try to invest in, but I really like to read books. And there's a lot of information out there that helps us learn for our business, learn for podcasting, learn for all of the things, or just pleasure in reading. And it gives me that space to listen. So Rodney, thank you for putting me onto them, because I'm excited to put other people onto it too.
Yo, man, glad I could help. I love it. I've been doing it for years. I highly recommend it.
And I know you do it for driving. And
yeah, I do it for driving in LA. And honestly, you get to get one book for free. You can send a book to a friend for free. You can return any book if you don't like it. I mean, that's lovely. And, they got a trial period going on. You get a free membership to start. So we're going to put a link on our website. Go check it out. It's an affiliate link. We do get a little bit on the back end, so you're supporting us. We would really appreciate it. Go to our website, moreincommonpod.com. Check it out.
Check it out. Audible.
kids are surprised if I'm an attorney. They're really surprised by it. I'm like, no, you absolutely can do it. I mean, everything that everyone's doing, for the most part, you probably can do. I mean, I'm not going to tell you can be a rocket scientist like the other guest you had, but it's reading and writing. Like 1 + 1 is always 2, wherever you go. Like, you can read and comprehend, and you can apply facts, and you can reason. You can be an attorney. So then there's an almost, which I don't believe in. You can do anything. I'm like, let's be real with children and tell them, hey, you're really good at this, and this is what you should focus on. That pipe dream, you're just not so good at it. So.
Hello. Welcome back. Today we are with Keith Ferguson. Keith, how are you, sir?
I'm doing well. And yourself?
Doing great. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
In the lead up, just a few minutes ago, you mentioned something that was kind of interesting to me. You said that you'd like to tell young folks they can do almost anything.
Yes.
Yeah.
What's your, talk to me about that. Talk to us about that.
So, I mean, I grew up in D.C. and Southeast in the 80s, and anyone who's familiar with D.C. from then, although it's gentrified and it's a much different city now, back then it had a reputation for crime, a lot of other things as well. It was like a black mecca, but also there was a criminal element.
What part of D.C.?
Southeast.
Like D.C. proper?
Yeah, D.C. proper. And then I moved to PG County when I was about 13, in the 7th grade.
Okay.
But I grew up on Anacostia Road, Eli Place, played football at Marshall Heights and number 14 Boys and Girls Club. So all the kids I grew up with, we either went to H.D. Woodson or Eastern High School. So, that's just, my foundation. Mm-hmm. But a lot of what you want to do is just exposure and what you see. And then, and a lot of us, it was a limited exposure.
Yep.
So if I'm in that area or talking to kids or going back to the program, kids are surprised if I'm an attorney. They're really surprised by it. I'm like, no, you absolutely can do it. I mean, everything that everyone's doing, for the most part, you probably can do. I mean, I'm not going to tell you can be a rocket scientist like the other guest you had, but it's reading and writing. Like 1 + 1 is always 2, wherever you go. Like, you can read and comprehend, and you can apply facts, and you can reason. You can be an attorney.
So it's interesting you bring him up, because in that we talk about this concept, and he actually said, he's like, I didn't know. There was a point where I didn't know anything about rockets. He's like, there's a point where I didn't know how to walk. I learned how to walk. He's like, give me enough time, I can figure out rockets. I can figure out how to make movies. I can figure out anything that you put in front of me.
I mean, most things, if it's technical, you can learn it. I mean, there's an art to a lot of, I guess, what we do, and that differentiates us. But everything's been done by someone before. It's just a matter of, do you have the time and can put the effort into learning it, which, it may not come as easy, but you can learn it for the most part. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I say almost because, of course, there's going to be there's some systemic things. Maybe there's monetary barriers to entry. And there's some people who do have, some challenges. Like, if you're not going to be a rocket scientist, if you're not good in calc and all the other sciences and math courses, that may not be your strength.
Right.
You may be more of a writer or a creative person or someone that's an advisor of sorts, but not so much of a technical skill set. So then there's an almost, which I don't believe in. You can do anything. I'm like, let's be real with children and tell them, hey, you're really good at this, and this is what you should focus on. That pipe dream, you're just not so good at it.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure if you watch Killer Mike. He talks about nah, you're not. This isn't your lane. You're good at this.
Yeah.
And focus.
So. And I think it's a great point, and understanding what it is that you are good at or that drives you. We talk about this from time to time about just sports, right? Mm-hmm. You can work so hard to get to a certain place, but everybody's cap is a little bit different, right? Some people's cap is the moon. Some people's, they just don't have the hand-eye coordination. They probably shouldn't play sports.
Don't have the footwork.
So
don't have the whatever.
Yeah.
You don't have the vision. You don't have whatever it is, like the eyesight. My eyesight's 120 and 120, right? And I need super corrective lenses, and I just don't have that reaction time, or whatever it might be. Mm-hmm. It's almost, but I love that. If you find what you love,
Find what you can do, find what you're good at, find what you enjoy, and then work your tail at it, and you can achieve it. You can achieve the highest stakes in it, right?
Yeah. Do you think so? Like comments like anybody can be president, or you can do anything. It makes me think of the Key and Peele skit. There was one of them was playing a football player. He's like, "You can do anything, literally. You can fly."
it is along those lines. So you're like, let's be. Now the thing about anyone can be the president. The way things have gone recently, it's just my opinion. It makes everyone say, "Hey, that's a viable job for me if I have enough money."
It seems like
it's like, all right, because there was a time, at least for some people who recently voted, they were like, all right, the president is much smarter than me, and I'm never going to be that smart.
Mm-hmm.
I can understand why that person has that job. And now you're like, oh,
I could do that.
Maybe not so much.
Yeah.
Now we're old enough to remember President Bush and to know like he may not have been a rocket scientist, but you're like, can do that job at least intellectually.
Right.
But
at least from what I'm seeing on the press junket or whatever.
Yeah. But
like you said, economic barriers or monetary barriers.
Absolutely.
That's a big one, especially in today's politics. You said something about kids are surprised he is an attorney.
Yeah.
Or you're an attorney. Like to talk about like why.
I mean, growing up in that urban environment, suppressed socioeconomic status for most people living at or near the poverty level for the most part. They're just not used to seeing that profession. I had buddies who didn't learn how to tie a tie until they were 25, 30 because no one in their family tied a tie.
Mm-hmm.
And when they did go to church, just had a clip on.
Mm-hmm. And
like they were like they weren't used to people in I guess the corporate professions where a certain tie type, people who drove a truck, maybe drove a bus, or people who kind of just got by in the black market. But so certain professions they looked at as like, oh man, you got to be super smart. You have to go to this school, and inevitably in certain black communities, especially in the 80s, people were like, oh, you got to be a white boy, you got to be a Jew. Like those are the lawyers.
Yeah.
And we do this part of it. So we need them if we need to get out of trouble or if we make it to the league to be our agent. And I'm like, why can't you do it?
Mm-hmm.
And then everyone has an idea like, oh man, it's too much school. I'm like, it's another 3 years after college. So if you go to college, it's just another 3 years. But then
how many are thinking about college?
So a lot of people are, but goes back to sports. Everyone's like, I thought I was going to go to Florida State and be like Charlie Ward because he was my favorite college player at the time. And I thought I could go to Georgetown, transfer for basketball season, and be like Charles Smith and play basketball. I really thought that's what it was. And that was why I wanted to go to college. I didn't want to go for education as a kid.
Oh, really?
I just wanted to go and play sports and be on NBC and play against Notre Dame and go get the Heisman and then go pro. So people think of it from that aspect, not so much of, get the education and go out here. Of course you hear it. People may tell you, but as a 8, 9, 10-year-old, you realize, oh, this person, you didn't do it. So how can you tell me? I know what works. I see on TV.
I see what works, and I'm not seeing that. I'm not seeing a black lawyer. I'm not seeing that.
You don't see it yet. If you don't see it, you don't think it's something that you do.
Mm-hmm.
Which is why I'm like, I really like to volunteer and give back. And if there was a program where you can have these kids go and sit in court, they have it a lot, but like where you can go and sit in and you see people and you realize, oh, law is not at all what I see on the TV,
mm-hmm.
what I see in the movies. It's actually pretty boring sometimes. I go to an appearance at 9:30, I'm done at 9:40, and you're like, oh, but they think it's Matlock or they think it's litigating. It's not like that all the time. But being able to go and see it, like, oh, I can do that, and this guy or woman looks just like me. They're from my neighborhood,
mm-hmm.
and they'll realize this is something that's within reach.
Where did the flip happen for you? Like if you were looking at sports, then when did you just say? So
I always did well in school early on, and my father raised me. My grandmother was there. My great-grandfather was a preacher, and some of his children were pastors and preachers. So, and my father worked in the bank. So he was always like, you can do whatever you feel like doing. Like if you want to go to this school, you can go to that school. Like why can't you? Like I didn't have this concept that I can't do it, but my father was he was smart. Like even at his bank, although he wasn't in an executive or in an administrative capacity, but he was definitely a person that they relied on. So I was able to see like, oh, he kind of has influence here. So I knew, I knew he was smart. I knew how he was regarded by his friends. And my grandmother, who grew up born in the 40s, went to school during segregation, got kicked out after desegregation for fighting white girls because it was going to be some tension. She was always like, no, you're going to go to school and you can do anything anyone else can. Mm-hmm. She's like, I know it because you're smart. It was different for me growing up in the 40s, but there's no reason why you can't do it. So I always figured, okay, like I didn't think that was beyond me. I thought, oh, that's something I'll do once I finish playing sports.
So you had a thought.
Yeah, and then going up in D.C., I mean, you see Marion Barry as the mayor. You know, for whatever people say about him, like D.C. in the 80s, all the administration, the city council was people who look like you. So you kind of, the backdrop was there. Although your neighborhood, what was in front of you, may not have been anything of academia. It was all criminal or street stuff, but the backdrop was there.
You had the representation.
So you had a little bit of both going on, and it was just then that different element for you. At least it sounds like was family.
Absolutely, yeah.
Like where they were steering. Like
what?
Where you're, yeah.
So you talked about Florida State, Georgetown, but you ended up going to Cornell. Playing Ivy League football. Like, so what sparked that decision? Not to, I mean, it's Ivy League, education, academic. To Rodney's question, like, what drove that? As you said, you were thinking about school later. Like, how did you come to that decision?
Options. So coming out of high school, I weighed like 135. So Florida State and Stanford were not knocking at my door. I mean, because I did well academically, so I thought, I can go to Stanford. They have a good academic reputation, Pac-10, it's on TV. But just size-wise, I knew probably what my options were. And they were recruiting. They started sending letters maybe my junior year. Got some interest from like local schools and like some 1AA schools at the time that were on the East Coast. So at that point, I know like, well, if it's an Ivy League school and it's still 1AA and it's Georgetown or Towson or let's say Lehigh, I'm like, well, I might as well go Ivy. Like it doesn't, like why wouldn't I go? Because I'm not getting any more interest from West Virginia. And I'm like, at 135, I'm like, I'm going to have to redshirt. And at 17, I thought I was like the best thing smoking. I'm like, I'm not redshirting. Not me, not Keith Ferguson. So that's really how the Ivy League happened. And then when the letters came in, I didn't know Cornell was an Ivy League school. My stepmother was like, this is a Ivy League school. I'm like, oh, okay. I'm like, all right, I'll pay attention to it now, I guess. But
so it was a big, once you figured that out, it was a big deal. Like, oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm like, I knew. The thing is, everyone knows HYP, Harvard, Yale, Princeton. Like, those who stick out. Yeah. Cornell, I was like, I guess. But that was not my intent. I was playing. Of course, if you're competing against people who are getting recruited by 1A schools and you're dominating, you're doing well against them, you think, why wouldn't I just go there? Mm-hmm. And then you're like, oh, I'm 135. That person is 180 right now. When they leave college, they might be 205.
Yeah, right.
So I knew, at least from a physical standpoint, it would just be, I wouldn't get as many looks. So I went with, you go with who's looking at you. Like I tell people, I'm like, I'm not going to chase. I'm going to go with who wants me. And between the Ivies is the best option for me, at least. And Cornell continued to recruit me. And it was my coach, Ron Prince, who's now at Howard as their head coach. And he did a couple stints in the NFL. He recruited me relentlessly, even when I injured myself in the preseason. The other Ivies fell off. So that's pretty much how I wound up at Cornell.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Glad you did.
Oh, yeah. Me too.
Yeah.
It was awesome.
I mean,
go ahead, Rob. Did the weight thing end up being, like, do you think it would have been, like, they weren't recruiting, but, like, could you have played anywhere?
Yeah, sure. From at least playing receiver, and then if you're playing D-back, I just have to cover you. Like, I don't have to jam you at the line. I don't need to do that. If I can get to the football before you do on defense, then I won. It's like Fred Smoot. I mean, he was a phenomenal cornerback in college, but he was, I guess, undersized, if you should say. But he's like, they don't pay me to jam. They don't pay me to tackle. I just need to get to the football before the other person does and stop them from catching it. So from, the speed standpoint, agility, and all those things, sure. But I'm not going to win for you on the goal line. Not me. Nah, I'm not, if I had to tackle
not
Eddie,
not the Sherman-esque.
if I don't know, if an Eddie George type dude was running, is a 3rd and 1, or he's goal line,
gonna get that.
he's going to get it.
I'm gonna tap this play out, coach.
Yeah, the DC should not have put me in that position.
Right, they should know better.
In offense, you're just running routes. It's just if you can get open, get separation, you can win.
Right,
like that's it. You just
which actually probably helps with that.
Yeah, you don't let anyone get your hands on you. I mean, even a receiver who's 180, if the right corner gets their hands on you,
you're toast. Yeah,
it doesn't matter. So,
I mean, you look at the Wes Welkers, the Julian Edelmans, the Cordell Stewarts. Like these are all not small people, right? Or big people.
Even Sproles when he splits out.
He's just quick and fast and can get separation. The ball gets there and they move the chains.
Yeah.
Although I will say Wes Welker and those guys are surprisingly bigger in person when you see them. I mean, 5'10", 190, 195, 200.
That's a big human being. Yeah.
Like regular walk around, you're like, oh, that guy's jacked.
You said your father raised you.
Yep.
And your grandmother?
Yeah.
And your grandmother.
His mom?
Yep. Yeah. So, which is abnormal, right? For your at least certain environment, like your father be the primary caretaker. So my mother and father met in the military in Germany. She's actually from out here in Long Beach, but family's originally from Oklahoma, Oklahoma City, and like little country towns like Henny Pen and Wynnewood. So they're out the country.
Never heard of any of these. Henny Pen and Wynnewood.
Yeah, and it was a real
I
feel
name.
Like
we walked into Winnie the Pooh. Like,
shout out to them.
So they met in the military, and like anyone in the military who going in, some people say, oh, it's the military. I'm like, a lot of people I know. I don't know about everyone else, but they were like, I need to go and do my 4. I can come out and get money for college, or I can get some points on my application when I'm going to get a job. Like that's why they're doing it, not because I love this country so much. I would
get my GI Bill.
That's it. Yeah. So they went, 79. My father went 78 or so. So they met there, got married, had me, came back to the West Coast. But my mother had me. She was 20. My father was 22. So when they split, my mother was young and still active. My father was like, came out to come get me. So of course I'm 2 years old. I don't remember all the details of it, but I went to live with my father, and then it never was an issue. Never was something like, oh, your mother's coming to get you. Like in fact, I didn't see her again till I was like, that I remember I was about 10 years old.
Oh yeah.
So I mean, in person at least. But my father raised me, which was in my neighborhood was like one of the few guys that their father was present every day. It was just the opposite. But then as a kid, you realize like, all right, I have one parent like everyone else. It's just flipped. And everyone had a grandmother. Like everyone had a grandmother that helped. So that wasn't different. Like, so yeah.
But say like everyone else, like was this the single parent was the norm?
Yeah, very much so.
Yep.
Very, very much so. A few guys, I mean, fathers were around, but it was the parents may have split. They may not have really been a couple, but a child was born, so the fathers would come get the children or whatnot. But a lot of it definitely was a single parent. It's just common.
Yeah.
And something you don't think of. Well, at least I didn't think about. It's just what it was.
Yeah, you were just a kid.
Yeah.
How do you have a relationship with your mom now?
I do. It's a weird relationship in that it is mother son, but it's definitely more friend. And I guess maybe that is what happens as you become an adult. So we just miss that whole mother son like raising you part. And now as adults, you're like, all right, well, whatever happened, we're not going to fix it. And there's not an issue for me. I'm like, hey, life happens. She had my sister and brother. You had to take care of those kids. I'm doing well over here. And, we worked it out. Like, it's not a big deal. But now, I mean, I still love you. You're my mother. And, like, I have my wife, and we're going to have a family at some point, God willing. And, like, I want you to be a part of it. And that's just kind of how it rocks. Although there's times where she'll say things. I'm like, Mom, you didn't raise me. Like, you don't get
like
to,
you don't get
to make that decision. Like, you don't get to have input here, which is just, but that's the dynamics of our relationship.
Yeah.
You're very, it's interesting. Like, what kind of impact? You're very calm about this. Like, it's very, I mean, anytime you hear a story that, you weren't raised, you were basically raised without a mother. Like, that's a big deal, and it just is. Like that's just the life and the card that you were dealt. Like how do you get to that place? Like is that the influence of your dad, your grandmother? Like
absolutely,
what is that for you?
It's definitely my father and grandmother's influence and how I was raised, which probably has made me callous to a degree. And I know, like, I had exes, and even my wife now is like, listen, you might have mommy issues, like things. She's like, it had to have impacted you and had some type of effect on you. Mm-hmm. But like, I grew up and I knew, bad things happen to good people. Like, and the sun is still gonna come up tomorrow. You got to put one foot in front of the other and keep going. Like, that's just what it is. And as a child, you just be able, at least for me, I was able to compartmentalize and know, like, okay, well, that happened. It's not changing, so you make the most of the situation. And then, and I would compare myself to my friends. I'm like, well, they have one parent. I have one parent. Like, it's not abnormal for us. So I didn't think I was longing for something or missing, like the mother's touch, because my grandmother essentially mothered me.
You still had a
female
strong
she basically
woman,
mothered me. Like, in a sense, basically that was my mother for me. So I didn't feel like I missed out on it. And it almost like you don't miss what you can't measure. And like, I didn't see her. I wasn't around it, so it didn't make me miss it. I guess it would be one thing if my mother was there and I could see her and she wasn't around to take care of me. That would probably affect you, but not seeing it.
Yeah.
You seem to have a very logical approach, just the way you break down a lot of things. Like, can you read? Can you write? Okay, you can be a lawyer. Like, can you reason? It's the same as all my friends. I just have my dad instead of my mom. Mm-hmm. Is that innate? Or is that also from parents or school, or like what? How did?
I want to say it's innate, but I'm sure it's some nurturing. I would imagine. Although I wasn't necessarily like an emotional child, so I'm not necessarily so much as an emotional adult, which is not great for my wife. She's like, "All right, you should have feelings," and like, I know the logic, but I just want to be heard. I'm like, well, you're telling me this. This is the problem. It's A and B. I have a solution. She's like, no. I just want to be heard. I'm like, that's not how I work.
This sounds familiar. I know this.
Yeah. So I think I think over time I just became logical because things made sense, and like my grandmother or father would say, like, hey, the rain falls on the just and unjust alike. Bad things happen to good people. You're just not gonna understand it. But you can either wallow in it and stay where you are, or you can continue to move forward and make the most of it. And then over time you see things, you're like, oh, this is not the worst thing in the world. It's not ideal. It's not the worst thing in the world. Other bad things happen. No big deal. And you continue on.
You said you thought you were callous, or I think, you mentioned you thought you might be callous, and your wife said, oh, you might have issues. Like, is she saying that just because of the situation, or because like of what you're saying, like I might be callous? Like, what does that mean?
But definitely with the situation as the backdrop, she's like, the way you process and the way you the way you empathize, it's like you're definitely a little more hardened, or a little more just like, okay, but so what are you going to do about it? As opposed to, let me hug you and tell you it's going to be okay. I'm like, well, it's actually not going to be okay unless you do boom, boom, boom. And she's like, the person doesn't want to hear that right now.
Right.
They may need, I'm like, what? They have a problem. If you don't
solve it,
fix the problem or solve it now, it's going to continue and linger and only get worse. So,
which is actually kind of I guess lawyers a good
career,
a good profession for that mindset.
It makes sense too. It does make sense, but then you do need a lot of empathy as an attorney, depending on what you're doing and who you're representing, and how you paint them to whoever your audience is, whoever the judge is, or the jury. You do need to humanize them.
How do you channel that? How do you channel that for yourself?
So when I was representing people who are, let's say it's credit card debt or criminal defendant or some family issue, you want to humanize them to a degree. But a lot of my work is for banks, and you almost cannot humanize a bank. You can only just talk about equity. Numbers. Say someone is taking, they haven't paid a mortgage in 7 years. I can't do that. I have student loans to pay. But you know your audience, and also the drive to, you kind of want to win. Not kind of, you want to win. So you figure out a way to get it done, and you go in there and do your job, and you leave out of it. And it becomes that simple. But I'm not like doing consumer debt and representing a number of people and representing people who are being harmed by companies, so it's not as draining, which I imagine like that type of work in family law and especially child representation work or immigration.
So you're not in like deeply emotional.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, sure there could be emotions, but it's not. Yeah, not the same as those family cases.
Yeah, working for a bank is not nearly that type of.
It could be a lot more cut and dry, which also could fit your personality more.
Yeah.
It's still interesting too, because like one of our episodes, we interview an attorney in Southern California who represents victims of institutional molestation. You know, whether it's the church or school or whatever, sexual assault in that regard.
Force,
and he still processes information very similar. Like it's compartmentalized, it's logical, it's practical. Got to move forward. So it's just it's a fascinating parallel.
But he's got to
go to therapy.
Yeah,
he's still got to work through
yeah.
it. Like there's a lot of other stuff that has to go into that. Now, how do you navigate this? Like let's talk about relationships here, which is something we've actually never talked about before. There's an interesting dynamic. How do you navigate that with your wife, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like for me, as an example, I totally get where you're coming from. It's like, hey, you've got a problem. Why don't you fix it, right? Like one of the things that it's like me time, right?
Mm-hmm.
I would constantly talk to my wife. It's like, hey, take it. Like, you need it, take it. I'll give it to you. It's not a problem. But it's not that simple emotionally, right? And navigating that to have a stronger relationship and continue to go forward is important. Like, how do you manage that, especially coming from a very logical place?
It definitely took premarital counseling that continued, I guess, after marriage. We just continued the counseling because it was going well. And it's you sitting down and that person being able to explain, I guess, what they need and, like, the way you respond, how that makes them feel. And you're like, okay, I guess you feel pretty shitty, or I'm not giving you the response that you need. And it's constant work because my default is fix it. Mm-hmm. Like logic, I don't know why we're debating this or why we're working through emotions. There is a solution. There is an answer, or there's a next step. Are we doing that? Because if we just talk about your feelings and then this happens again and we're talking about your feelings, we never took the next step to get things done. But the premarital counseling helped a lot because you're like, oh, okay. Oh, this is how that works. And yeah, I guess I'm probably being dismissive of her feelings, and I didn't consider it. I thought I was helping, but wasn't helping at all.
What prompted premarital counseling?
We didn't like do anything, I guess, religious as far as getting married, but I knew a lot of people did premarital counseling, and she did as well. And she was like, would you consider it? She's like, she thought I was that guy, like, therapy, get the fuck out of here.
Right.
And I was like, you know what? You want me to do it, or you think you want to go and talk about our relationship? Sure, I'll do it.
So you're willing to consider it.
I was like, all right, you want to do it? Sure. I'm like, they're not going to change my mind. Like, I know what I think about things, so sure. But going in there, you're like, oh, okay, this is actually pretty helpful. And my cousin, Gregorio, he actually told me about his premarital counseling. And I was like, okay. And like my cousin, we're like brothers, like almost 2 years apart. So he said it was really helpful in his relationship. So I figured, all right, I can go talk to a stranger. I'm like, at the same time, it's frustrating because you're like, you're my wife, my fiance. I would think you can just say anything to me.
Right.
And you realize, like, it doesn't work that way.
Blind
they do
spots.
need that medium. Yeah, I'm like, it was eye-opening for sure.
It's different, right?
Yeah. It's frustrating because you're like, I'm with you every day. And you're going to bring this up now.
Yeah.
4 years later. That's what we're doing.
4 years.
It's frustrating. Whereas me, logical, confronting problems head on, like, hey, I didn't like what you did. I would just say it, and just different responses. So
that's cool. You did something there. Like, we had a conversation yesterday. It was like a guy who's his entire career is about listening and teaching people how to listen. And he one of the things he said was, if people would just be willing to listen to somebody, even if they know 100% what their stance is, and just listen to hear what the other stance is, they might learn something. They may not. It might just make them more sure of what they know, or they might say, oh, you know what? I didn't even think about that. And it's just like that willingness to just do what you did and to say, all right, you want me to do it? I love you. My cousin brother says, like, yo, this is gonna be it helped me.
Yeah, I was like, all right, sure. But yeah, it definitely makes a difference. definitely made a difference. And I mean, it still work for me. It still work every day. Still, it's just gonna be one of those things. It's just not my default, and like, 20 something years of that being your default, it's hard to unwind it.
Oh yeah.
So it may take 20 more years or so to change.
My mentality is very similar to yours, whereas Keith has more of an emotional sensitivity because of how he was raised, like just the differences in how we were raised. So like I'm the super like, all right, can we get past this? And everybody's like, no, I need to process. In fact, you need to process as well. Like that's something that I've learned. Like even underneath it for me, there's feelings there that I need to get to deal with so that they don't just sit in some box somewhere to explode one day.
Yep.
How long you been married?
2 years. What are we? July? Almost 2.5 years now. I got married in February 2017.
You got that. You recalled that pretty quickly. Good job.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good because it's funny. My wife and I have the joke. My wife never remembers our anniversary and never remembers how long we've been together, which
I've
is
forgotten
an
my
awesome
own birthday,
twist of fate because I don't bother. It doesn't bother me. Yeah. Do you guys still do counseling?
No, we haven't. Haven't in a while. I imagine if she gets pregnant, and I imagine that may be something we'll go back and because it's a life-changing event. And it's probably going to affect the relationship and affect the way. I mean, everyone who's married or in any relationship, they say the kid or kids or children change everything.
They do.
And I'm like, okay, so why not be proactive? It would make sense. Although I'm not sure how much it would help because you don't know until it hits the fan, the baby's here.
Yeah.
But I'm sure. I imagine around that time we'll get back to it. Or if there's a
proactive approach. I like that.
Or if there's a point in marriage where we get to be confrontational or butting heads, we may need to figure out like, all right, let's go talk. If we can't do it amongst ourselves, let's go sit down before someone. I highly recommend it for anyone.
Do you find couples counseling to just be a logical thing to do? Like, because the way you talk about it, it's not things that people want to do. It's emotional. You're not emotional, but hey, this makes sense. We should try it. Right?
Yeah.
Let's go.
I think it is. At least for one, well, I think whoever initiates it more likely may have been, I don't know, from what I've seen is they're coming from the emotional perspective, like, hey, this is how I'm feeling. And they may be the one that's going to counseling and say, this would be helpful to us if you come join me. Mm-hmm. And I've seen it go that way, not so much of it's so logical, but the counterpart is usually the logical one, like, all right, sure. It's more like, okay, I'll go. But I've seen now more people I know who they just do their own individual therapy, so they're more open to couples therapy. Mm-hmm. As a kid, at least I didn't know teenager, young adult. I didn't know anyone who went to therapy.
Oh yeah.
Well, at least they wouldn't say it. If you went to therapy, it was like, man, what's wrong with you?
You talking to a head shrink?
Can't figure your own stuff out. Like what's up with this? Now I would like recommend it for anyone. So I wonder now the dynamics with more young people in therapy. Are they both, or if they're poly, however many they are, like, let's go and talk about things. Mm-hmm. So.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting question, Keith. Like the logical, I mean, I see it as from the logical thing for me is that, who was it? I think it was Dolly said, a guest we had, she said, if you don't think you have any blind spots, that's your blind spot. And so the point being, we all have blind spots. We all have bias. We all have something that we can work on. And if you're in a relationship with somebody else, like how are those blind spots affecting them? Mm-hmm. And going to counseling. So it's weird. Well, like for me and the way I grew up in my family dynamic, it's weird to use that outside party. Cause like for us, it was everything stays in. Like we take care of us here, even though we may or may not have actually been taking care of ourselves. Mm-hmm. But having that outside observer to say, whoa, did you hear how you said that? Or wait a second, how did you feel when he said that? Or when she said that? To like add that interjection into what you think is normal communication. And in a normal situation, one or both of parties might not feel comfortable saying it didn't make, I felt this, because they think they're assuming the response or they're used to the response that, and then you get that third party and it helps kind of diffuse it and allows everybody to really see, like shines a light on like what's actually happening.
Yeah, no, it absolutely does. And like family was the same way. Like if you have a problem, it's internal. Like, you don't bring other people into your business. You don't reach out to other people
no,
for
we don't
help
do that.
and let them know your business. No, that's ridiculous.
Right.
But so that definitely was the upbringing. And for us, it's you fix your own problems. Like, what's wrong? Like, all right, if you want to cry about it, okay, cry. And wait a few minutes. Did anything change? Nothing. Okay, so what are you going to do? Like, that was how I grew up in the logic. So for me, like, therapy was like, get out of here. Like, therapy, are you crazy? But now I say I recommend it to anyone. And then, like, it does allow you to be seen, to be heard, and to also, it's a mirror to, like, say, this is what you sound like. And if I did this to you, how would you respond? This is what he or she is feeling. Or let's say there's someone who's more dominant than you, and if I say something one way, they're going to just say this, and so I'm not even going to say it, and then that snowballs over time.
So there's cycles, and you're like, I can never be, I can't be me around you, or this, that, the other.
Absolutely. And you're like, wow. So definitely eye-opening.
What about this was early on before we started recording. You said it was kind of almost an aside. You were like, we were talking about kids.
Oh yeah.
And you're starting to think, you two are thinking about it, and you said, you're wondering how you're gonna do it. And he's like, you can't raise them how my parents raised me.
Yeah.
What did you mean by that?
So I in the 80s, I mean, of course, corporal punishment, whatever, that was it was easy. Like, it was not a thing. Now it's the school will call on you, and you can lose your children, other family members, and some people who gain, over time you've gotten more education. You say, you know what, that's not a requirement. But then there's also just a matter of I'm responsible for a human, and I didn't think about it, but like the people in my household, 3 different outcomes, same everything every day, and you're like, how do I control it to where I can have the most favorable outcome? Not 3 widely disparate outcomes. Some children I don't have to worry about, other ones I'm worried about until their 30s and their 40s. And I'm just with my nephew, and I'm like, he's 10 years old, and his cousin is 12, and just they're adolescent boys. And you see like little hints of insubordination, their displeasure with things. They may shrug their shoulders, roll their eyes, or just lazily do something because they don't want to do it. And I'm like, for me, like, I couldn't do that as a kid. It's physical confrontation right away.
Right.
Can't do it now. And now you have to find other ways to manage and discipline them, and also to educate them, because the world is smaller for them. I mean, social media, gaming, they can reach anyone, anywhere.
Yeah.
It's just a different dynamic. And I'm like, oh, wow, it's probably a completely different challenge. And like, my father couldn't help me a ton, at least as far as the social media component. Like, my cousin, he can. He has a 21-year-old, a 15-year-old, and a 10. So he's in it. So he may be able, he'll probably be my crutch and say, hey, how do you manage this? And it just occurred to me, I'm like, oh, wow, that's something I would have to worry about.
Yep.
So that it's more those things. And social media may be completely different by then, but it's just like,
sure.
Wow, I'm going to be, responsible for a human being and what that is like each and every day. Because it also affects what you can do. I can't tell my boss to kiss my ass. You know, I mean, I can go out and work for myself then, sure.
Yeah, right.
But
you have to.
There's a lot of things you just can't do when people are depending on you.
Right.
And that may not work with my temperament or personality, because I may say, you know what, no, I don't want to, whatever it is. I'm like, oh, that's political speech. I shouldn't have to do that, or at your job. And your boss is like, well, this is what we're doing. And are you willing to make a stand for whatever it is? And also your family's responsible for you. So that's that balancing. I'm like, oh, wow, that's a lot of other things to consider, where it was just me before. I'm like, oh, I'll be fine no matter what. So.
Like, a lot of people I know care, like, far more about things than I do. Like, what is it? I don't know, like some of the milestones. Like, oh, did they roll over today? And I'm like, they'll roll over when they roll over. But manners, like, the first time she said thank you, and she said please, and now she's getting your welcome. Like, that to me is everything. And sharing, and
especially those proactive thank yous. Like, bless yous when someone sneezes. It's like, go.
But yeah, just trying to give them the tools so that they can do what they can end up. How'd you say it earlier? Put them in a position to get that best outcome.
Yeah. Like,
as much as I can do. And you said something earlier about like having that line, like with your mom, like kind of that breaking point or the line or the boundary.
Yeah.
To say, like, this is okay, this isn't. This is mine to care for you. This isn't. Like, I don't know that I know where that is as a parent. I think parents probably struggle with that because you want it to be everything, right? Mm-hmm. And even though it's not all, which is hard. I've talked to my dad about it, and it's hard. It's hard separating because it's like, nah, it's my baby.
Yeah. Like, I tell my wife, and she's like, this is because of how you were raised. But I'm like, having a child, it's a relationship where the end is expected, like where there's a separation where like I'm raising you because I'm not going to always be here, but I want you to be self-sufficient.
Right.
Where everything else is like, we're going to be together forever. This is just how it's going to end. I'm like, no, a child, there's going to be an end date at some point or another. Ideally, me first. But I want them to be just fine without me. Like I'm raising you for that.
Yes.
So, like that's what I'm doing, and of course that's the reason, the purpose, and why you are the way you are with your children, why you discipline the way you do. You put certain values in them, but it's all with the expectation of that you're going to continue this without me because I'm not going to be here to reinforce it, and I want you to pass it on to other people. Mm-hmm.
I mean, you look at what happened with Tiger Woods. Like, just not to. I mean, once his dad died, right? Like his world changed.
Yeah.
And then everything else changed after that, right? Like
very much
his behavior changed with his wife, like all of that stuff. And I'm certainly no Tiger Woods emotional expert and know what he went through. But if you look at the chronological nature, like he was so dependent on his dad.
He wasn't prepared like for
once he died, it was like, but
that's
like to that point.
This is a tangent, but I actually thought Tiger Woods should have kept fornicating and doing all the things that made him happy because that's when he was playing his best. I think he was his best when he was doing those things, and but of course his father passing, and he's trying to hide these things. I'm like, man, just keep doing whatever makes you Tiger Woods. It may not be great for your marriage, it may not be great for other things, but for us, that's the Tiger that
for us it worked.
It's not great for him,
right.
but.
Yeah.
Did he? Yeah. You.
So I gotta take
like
a pivot here in the conversation. Talk a little bit about conversation tips because you said something at the before recording pre-show. Know when to walk away. Know when to stop.
That's actually where I wanted to go when I was talking about breaking points in line.
This is it's a principle that as we write our book that I've tried to incorporate is the idea of taking a pause. Like just take a pause when it's time. Like, how do you determine when that's the time? Like when that time comes and when you're in a conversation, and how do you determine if you should go back to it? Like, do you have is it a feel? Do you have a criteria? Like, do you have a advice like for other people to think through it for themselves?
I had like a kind of a policy, and it's come up in political conversations where I give the person one opportunity. Like we may disagree and it's not going anywhere. I'm like, all right, let's table it and maybe we can come back again. Like just give a pause because I'm pretty sure what I'm saying is logical and sound, and I don't think you're being reasonable. But you go back to it one more time, and if it's not productive, you have to just leave it. And then, like, I guess in relationships with people you care about, you're just going at each other and you're not going anywhere. You kind of have to say, hey, we're not moving any ground right now. We're not getting anywhere. Can we talk about it tomorrow? Or oftentimes with family, it doesn't work that way. People want to deal with it then.
Right.
But I think when it's people you care about, you may give other opportunities, but people you don't care, or it's just something in passing, you try to pause and say, you know what, this person doesn't want to listen to me. Like I can tell, like you have two ears and one mouth for a reason. You're supposed to do more listening than talking. I can tell they only want to get their point across. This is at this point now, it's all diminishing returns. This is not gonna serve me at all. And it's easy. It's taking a long time because you want to prove your point and you want to convince them, or at least at some point you realize you can't, and you want to show them how stupid they are in your opinion, or how smart you are. But it doesn't do anything for you. It doesn't change. It took me a while to get to that point and say, you know what, this isn't going to work.
I mean, being a lawyer, that's kind of what, like, getting your point across is what you do, right?
Yeah, in that situation, you have to do it. You have to say, all right, well, I have to create a record for appeal. Like if I'm in front of a judge and I'm like, you're not listening to the facts, at least as I'm
you have to
relaying
state it.
I need to put it on the record because I'm going to appeal. And then in the negotiation with opposing counsel, you just have to have, talk to your client and set realistic expectations and get an idea of what they really want and not what you want, and figure out like, okay, this is our line. Beyond this point, we're just not going to go any further. And you have to maintain that. You can't make a line and then say, okay, and entertain it more. You have to hold that line and be strong on that and just not go back. Being an attorney has helped with that because you're like, okay, this is it. I'm not going any further. All right, let's go litigate. But
for your personal line, when you're in a conversation with somebody who's not seemingly willing to listen or their point doesn't align with what you're saying or what you're thinking or what your logic is there how do you, what's the gauge? Is it a feeling? Is it just straight up like because you said it's not being productive. What does productive mean for you? Like if you're on the opposite ends of a political spectrum, like what's productive to you? Them listening to you?
Listening with the intent to it's like if I go into a conversation, it's going to be a discourse and I know I'm on the other side. I go in and think like, all right, I'm open to be convinced. But if you go in, I'm only going to do the convincing, it's not productive. It's not going to be productive. It's just going to be combative. I go in and say, all right, maybe this person has something to say. Although most time, like especially now in today's climate, my mind is made up. You cannot convince me. So at that point, it becomes all right, our ideologies are different. Do you have facts to support what you're saying? Not feeling, do you have facts? If you say, oh, these immigrants are just using it, I'm like, okay, do you have the records to show if immigrants are draining your resources or taking your jobs? Where are those facts? Can you show me the unemployment rate for this class of people since immigrants, whatever it may be? If you don't have that, you're talking from a feeling standpoint. I know now I can't convince you. It's like talking about religion. At the end of the day, it becomes, because my God says so. You can't win.
You can't argue with that.
Can't argue with that. It's just, you get to a point where you're like, oh, I'm not going to convince anyone. So especially now with politics, it's, do you have the facts to support it? Where is that coming from? Where did you hear that? And then that informs like my next step for the most part.
Now, do you generally, like in those types of situations, right? And I think this is where our mission comes into play. Like, no, I definitely get it. Like there are going to be times where, hey, you and I, maybe we just don't talk about this because it's not serving either of our emotional states, right? Like I'm irritated, you're irritated, and we're not getting anywhere, and we need to just focus on something else. Like when you say walk away, it's just walk away from that topic. Is it like, where do you draw that perspective and then like move on to something else? Do you just change the topic? Like what's the tip in that to maintain relationship without losing connection simply because you disagree on something?
Yeah, let's just walk away from the topic and say, you know what, we're definitely not going to agree. I haven't convinced you, you haven't convinced me. Like, okay, and move on to the next thing. But when it's things that are absolutely like deal breakers for you, then it is something where you say, hey, I can't, it's going to affect our relationship. Like we can't
like actually stating that, like let him know, like, hey, like there's a reason.
Like, and here's why, and so like I've had, friends and players who are Trump supporters, and like I'm like, okay, you're willing. I'm like, ultimately, and it comes down to with some of them, it's like you like economic policy. That's what you're telling me, but you recognize the racism, xenophobia, sexism. You recognize that, but because the economic policies may benefit you more, you're willing to just let that go. That's what you're telling me. Great, because this affects me, and there's no way we can coexist. Like there's some things that becomes that, and it's not a hard conversation for me. Cause I'd rather say it, but somebody you love may make it difficult to say, I really don't want to be around you, or it gets tough in that regard. But I got used to saying, no, I don't think we can be cool anymore. Which is, I guess, why people avoid politics and religion, right? Because it's gonna create some separation.
It can, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and one I think they avoid it because separation. Maybe they don't really know their positions. They don't want to talk about it, or it's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable to talk about a position where they declare that the economic policy is what's important to them, and you are more or equally focused on social policy, and so that becomes uncomfortable because maybe they didn't realize how that affects you, and then that just gets into a weird place, or all of the stuff. Yeah. But I don't know that it does any service to not talk about it, because then how do we change it?
It doesn't change. I think experience may change things. People, if it's something you disagree about, and it's like, all right, you're not going to be convinced about what I'm saying, we'll see how things happen, how they affect you. And maybe when you see them, you'll say, oh, this person was right, or I was wrong. That's about it. That's about it. But at some point, if it means enough to you and it's somebody you care enough about, you do have to say, we absolutely need to have this conversation to move forward. Or like, because I want to be able to explain my hostility towards you, or what's the difference or the change. Like, I want you to understand why it's not the way it was. So if it's somebody you care enough about, I think you have to have that conversation, to your point.
Interesting. Yeah. I wanted. Wait, do you have another question on that, Keith? Because I have another one.
Oh no, I was just going to say I think it's it's an interesting topic of conversation, and the idea, like for me, there are topics that maybe we just walk away from, and certainly there are times where it's like you're evaluating whether you're going to have a relationship with somebody, and it's like, maybe we don't need this, right?
I mean, there's only so much time in the day, right? Like,
there are only
can't
so
debate
many
everybody
people
on
that's right
foreign policy.
Exactly.
But I fundamentally, like, when it matters, like that type of situation, I'm not ever in the group that's affected, but just I think walking away from the conversation and revisiting it later is the reason Rodney and I are still friends, right? So, like,
sure,
personally,
disagree on
17
everything.
years later, like, had we just taken the you and I are gonna take a different approach, let's not be friends, like, it would change the course of our history, right? So I have the tendency to think more, but I know it's not for everybody, right? It's not the easiest thing to, and most people, like, especially in that situation, I don't want to constantly try to convince everybody that there's shit in this world.
It's
kind of
like
to stop rolling in it. Right?
It's kind of like what Graham said. Like, there are lines, and at the same time, we need some people that are willing to go across those lines to reach out to the other side in order to try and make some movement. But that's not for everybody. Like that, it's just for time, emotional status. Like, it's just it's not feasible. It's not realistic for everybody to go do, what's his name, Picciolini or whatever, like, go talk to the
Christian
white nationalists and like, that's just not for everybody.
Doesn't make sense.
Right.
Doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Now, you all's line, I guess the differences between you two weren't life-threatening, harmful lines that would say, what you believe in leads to harm upon me.
But they weren't harm lines. Like white national.
That's why I don't see.
The point.
There's that
exchange. Yeah, you gotta have line. Yeah.
But they were like religious, which a lot of people take as.
Oh, right.
I think that's the difference between probably me and some other people in religion. Like, it wasn't it wasn't my identity, so we could disagree, and it wasn't like he was attacking me. Whereas anybody, a lot of times with religion,
I wasn't disregarding his safety, or he wasn't disregarding.
Yeah, that's a fair point. Yeah, it gets
personal gain, right? Yeah. I only mention that because I've been thinking a lot about this, and the Trump supporter perspective is like, it's such a narrow viewpoint of people. There are a lot of people that did, and everybody did for a different reason. And to your point, there is that segment that says, I don't give a crap about you or anything else. If your life is worse off, but mine is better, then I'm fine. It's like, there is a delineation there of personal safety and care that if you don't care about me, why do I care about having a relationship with you, right? So
I think for
to
me,
have that
part
conversation is important.
For me with the Trump supporter, like I've had plenty of conversations with Trump supporters. I'm not like an overly strong Hillary supporter or anything like that, but it's like I want to understand where they're coming from so I can understand where what was the breakdown that allowed that to happen. And I know a lot of it, but because a lot of people I talk to, they're like, oh, because I like you, like I'm not against you, like, well, but like supporting this is actually against this, and a lot of people don't see that. So for me, it's like, oh, is there an opportunity for me to educate here? And that's just me. That's just who I am, and like who I like. I'm a line crosser. That's just part of my personality. I'm a habitual line stepper.
Line stepper. Hey,
you would have thought the drop kick in the chest would have been enough.
Oh man!
I know, Rodney. You have one more question.
I'm just curious. You said because you just made the Hall of Fame for the uni, and you said it took too long.
It did.
So,
absolutely.
Any thoughts as to why?
A number of things. I think had my original coach still been there, it would have been a first ballot thing. One excuse they'll give is that there were too many people from football represented in the Hall of Fame. They needed to kind of break it up. I'm like, oh, okay.
Is that accurate?
I mean, it's overwhelmingly, it's probably 40-50% football for sure. I mean, but it's the longest, it's the oldest sport at that school, so it makes sense. Another part of it, I mean, I didn't do my part as far as when I was in school. Like my last 2 years, I didn't make first team All-Ivy. I didn't do those other hallmark things where a reunion committee who comes back once a year at the reunion time, they look at a bunch of resumes and say, okay, that's Hall of Fame. And what they're looking for are first team All-Ivy, first team All, like if you have those or all ECAC or whatever, then that's an easy way to distinguish, whereas I didn't get that. And that's largely due to the program my last 2 years for sure, because we went from having a passing program to a coach that my junior year we threw the ball 100 less times. In the season, we played one less game. We threw the ball 100 less times. And the next season, we just didn't put the ball in the air as much. We wasn't putting it downfield, and the coach and I didn't get along. So I had my last 2 years were particularly challenging to even get numbers. So, but that's definitely a part of it. But I also felt disrespected. I'm like, no one in the history of the school has ever done what I've done in the 180-some year program, and everyone who I passed, they had coaches who were feeding them the football because they were trying to make steps to big 1A schools or to make steps to the pros, whereas I didn't have that at all. And yet I still did these things, didn't miss a game. There's no way I don't go first ballot, especially when the people who I passed were first ballot. It didn't make sense. And the quarterback, I'm like, they were first ballot. Why wouldn't I be? Just doesn't make sense. So it was just one of those things, but it was disrespectful. I was like, but I'm like, well, you know what? I'm in it now. It's no big deal. And I found out Deion Sanders, like one of my favorite athletes of all time, he didn't go in first ballot right away at Florida State. And I'm like, all right, well, it's not so bad. But initially at the outset, I absolutely were like, and especially my counterparts at Harvard or Princeton or Penn were getting in first ballot. So I'm like, whoa, like what are we doing here?
Right.
So yeah, but it's one of those things you're like, oh, okay. I mean, but you're in it, and it's like, oh, no big deal. But I still feel away. It's like if you don't pass the bar the first time, you're still a lawyer, but you still didn't pass the first time. It's just still going to be there.
Is that on the record? Is that known?
I really don't know.
He's like, I don't know. I did it the first time.
I don't know if it shows that you failed the first time or whatever. Or if
I think it's expunged. I think it's whatever you passed.
Once they about when you didn't pass, unless you're Kennedy and they bring it up.
Unless you want to tell people you failed 4 times and it took you so many times. I don't think there's a record.
Nobody's like, I'm the lawyer that got C's. Nobody's like, nobody.
Although those people, those men and women make some of the best attorneys.
Why is that?
They have. A lot of them are litigators that I've seen, even people who do transactional work. But because there's theory and then there's application. For application, they can really apply it. And there's a lot of other things. Some people are brains and they can understand things, but when you put them in front of a jury and speak, they'll stammer and stutter and they just don't come across well. Other people, So it's
like,
many.
It's
I
like
guess,
My Cousin Vinny.
Yeah, the artistic part of it, and then also the doggedness you need, because some of them are like, I'm going to work hard to win.
Yeah,
and it's a different thing.
Yeah.
I've seen it go, like they say a lot of the A students go teach and they become theorists and all that stuff.
I can see it.
That's kind of a thing, I guess, amongst lawyers, they say. So,
Well, this has been absolutely a pleasure.
Yeah, great. I mean, thank you guys. This is my first time ever doing anything like this, and this was like pretty dope.
I appreciate you
Cool.
coming on.
I'm
I got
glad
one
you-
last question.
And thank you.
Yes.
Thank you for joining us, and this helped me get back into a better mental state
Better
to
place.
move forward with the rest of the
Look
day.
at this. You just made a man's weekend.
Ah, nice.
So what would you like to leave our listeners with?
I would say, no matter what, remember that the sun is still going to come up tomorrow. Like, it's going to be good and bad. It's going to happen to you no matter how much good you do. Like, you're not owed anything by the world. You only can control what you can control, and that's your energy and what you put out. But you get, until you on the other side of the dirt, you get another opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
And you only can make the most of tomorrow. You can't go backwards. Going backwards, it's unproductive. I mean, remember it, utilize it, don't ever forget it, but you have to move forward. You have to know, like, tomorrow's another day. I got another opportunity. I can be better than I was yesterday. And, like, for me, I'm result oriented. Like, either you're getting better or you're getting worse. I try to hold myself to that, and that kind of motivates me every day. Like, okay, did I get better? Was I a better person today? Was I nicer? Did I do something? Or did I fall back? And I evaluated. So the sun's coming up tomorrow. Get after it.